everyone, it's Samantha, and I'm here bringing you a video that you've probably heard about the book, but I feel like I could share some more insight based off of my personal experience of reading the book. So I listened to the audiobook of Sadie, which I'll put the cover right here, and this is a book about these two girls, Sadie and Maddie. Maddie is found dead at the very beginning of the book, not a spoiler. Maddie is found dead, and soon afterwards, her older sister Sadie goes missing. The whole book focuses on Sadie's journey. You're following her on what she's doing, but also following this reporter who makes a podcast trying to follow Sadie and try to track her down. This was a difficult book for me to read. I picked it up because it sounded like a really good mystery story, and there's a lot of positive reviews out there. I've heard about this book on multiple channels, more specifically Between Chapters had talked about this audiobook because that's how she prefers to read some books, and she really recommended the audiobook, and she has pretty good taste on audiobooks. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. But there is also this, I guess you'd say, trigger warning in regards to sexual assault. And it's kind of part of the reason why I was so hesitant about starting this video or making this video, because the trigger warning is a big thing for me. I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there, but I am actually a survivor of sexual abuse. So for me, I'm in a pretty good part of my healing process. I've been dealing with the therapy aspect for years, and when I heard about the trigger warning, I took a minute to assess whether this is something I should read or not. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm doing pretty good in my recovery. I think I could handle it. I got through 80% of the audiobook, okay? So I got through a big chunk of it where I was completely okay with how the story was going. And then it got to the last 20% or so, and then it was not okay. If you follow me on Twitter or on Goodreads, which I'll leave those links below, you may have noticed that I put a status update saying that I regret starting this book, and that's what it's in reference to. So I just kind of wanted to take this opportunity to talk about why trigger warnings are important, and just talking a little bit about the book. I personally have an issue with the current culture using triggered as like a joke. And I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. There will be a situation that someone talks about and they're like, oh, triggered. I'm like so not okay with that, because in personal experience, I do get triggered at some points. It used to happen a lot more often, but to this day, like with this book, I do get triggered, and it's kind of an insult to have this joke going around about being triggered by things that don't make any, like, they're talking about you, and so, oh, I'm triggered. You're not upset, you're not going through a traumatic event, you're not trying to deal with your mental health because of the mention of something, like a lot of people do. If you haven't heard, 1 in 4 women is sexually assaulted at some point in their life. So I know I'm not the only one out there who feels this way, and I feel like I just need to speak to it about, if you're using that triggered joke, just stop using it. It's a social acceptable joke right now, but it's not okay. It's not okay. I'm going to say it. It's not okay to use triggered as a joke, because some people, being triggered is not a joke. I spent this whole week having a really difficult time trying to get myself out of, I wouldn't say depression, because it wouldn't be considered depression because it only lasted for a few days, but I was definitely in a heavy cloud for a few days after reading this book, and it was very difficult to get myself out of it. So I kind of want to just shed a little light too on why did I read this book then? If I ended up in this big heavy cloud and, I actually did get triggered by it, even though I was aware of the trigger warning, why did I still read it? And I do want to say, I really believe it was because it's such a hyped up book right now. You see it all over BookTube. Everyone's talking about Sadie. Everyone's talking about the audiobook and how it's so good. And it is. That's what's so difficult, is that it really is a great book. And it is a really good audio. It made it feel real. The podcasts are talked in a way where it's like an actual podcast. And Sadie's narrator does such a good job in staying in character. And I think that's what happened, was it was too real. It was too real. I think if I had read the book, it's a good question. Maybe if I had read the book, I wouldn't have been as triggered. Like, I would have probably been upset. I probably would have been crying. But after putting the book down, who knows? Hindsight's 50-50, but I probably would have been fine. But the fact that I was listening to it and I could hear Sadie's emotions, it was hard. It was really hard, because I totally identified with how she was talking, definitely at the end of the book. With my recovery, I've spent literally a decade working on this, going to therapy and getting help on my trauma, and I felt like I had gone far enough that I could handle this without going down a backslide. And that didn't happen. I did go on a little bit of a backslide, and it affected my work. I know it did. And luckily I work with licensed therapists at my job, so it was really nice. I could just talk to them a little bit, but I know not everyone is able to have a therapist to talk to at work on the spot. It just doesn't work that way in the real world, and I know that. I'm very grateful for that. But I kind of wanted to shed this light on maybe when we put out a trigger warning on a book, to actually listen to the trigger warning. If it says that it's triggering for sexual assault, or if it's triggering for domestic violence, or it's triggering for cutting or for suicide, it's really important to listen to those triggers. And that's why it's really important to put those triggers into your book reviews. I see a lot of booktubers already doing that, which is amazing. I'm so thankful for that. This was just my first one that it came up on being sexual assault, and I was really interested in the book. So I was like, oh, well, I'll handle it. It'll be okay. No, I should have listened. I'm not gonna lie. I should have listened and just not read the book. One of my issues that I had with the book, and I think this is really my only issue that I had, was, as I said, Sadie's narrator did an excellent job of staying in character. And I felt that she really did capture the emotions that someone who underwent that trauma would go through. And just her whole experience of her journey and why she's missing. It makes sense. But through, I want to say like 90% of her dialogue, she is angry. Furiously angry. And you feel it. You feel her anger. And at times when I picked up the audiobook and I would listen to it, maybe it was because I wasn't feeling angry, or maybe it was because like I was picking it up and wasn't fully immersed yet. But sometimes it was really hard for me to identify why she's so angry. Definitely towards the ending, you get more answers and you get more of a full picture of what happened and connecting the dots in regards to Maddie being killed. But she's really angry, really angry. And I think it was just kind of hard for me to hear her being so angry. I think it was because I was identifying with her and I'd never been that angry all the time. So I was like, why is she being so angry? Because I'm not angry. And I think that was part of why I was so triggered, is like I was already identifying with her. So that was a little disjointed for me because it's not what I would do. But then on the other hand, I have not had a sister killed when she was 13 years old. So that's part of it too. I really enjoyed the plot of the story. I really liked how things were released little by little and it made sense. I like the way that there was like a time difference between where Sadie's story was at and where the podcast journalist story was at. The journalist was like at least a few months behind, if not more. So what Sadie was going through was actually a little bit ahead of what the journalist was finding out. When it came to the end of the story, I'm not going to spoil it, but when it came to the end of the story, I wish it hadn't ended the way it did. But when I sat with it and thought about it, I really don't think there's any other way you could end it. I really don't. I think just to stay in tone with the rest of the book, if you'd given readers a different ending, it would have detracted from the rest of the book. Personally, I gave this 4 stars, but that's personally my own opinion of it, my own experience of the book. And if sexual assault is not something that triggers you, then please listen to it. It's a great book. It's done very well. And like I said, audiobook is amazing. But if you do get triggered by sexual assault, especially in regards to sexual assault as a child, just don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's not worth your mental health to read the book. It really isn't. There are hundreds of thousands of really good books out there, and you'll be able to experience the same thing and not lose your mental health. So those were my thoughts on the book. I just wanted to share that and put that out there and why it's so important to have trigger warnings. So thank you and have a good day. Bye.